Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing this morning?
All right.
Sounds tinny? I don't know what happened. If someone wants to mess with it while I'm talking, they're more than welcome to. It's totally fine. So for those of you who may or may not have known, yesterday was a pretty significant event in the United Kingdom. There was a procession, there was a coronation that took place of King Charles III. Did anybody watch it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys got it? And my family, namely my daughter and my wife had the idea to get up at 5 a.m. to watch it. And so they did, which means we all got up to watch it because we didn't want to not be part of the scenario, right? So we got up, made our coffee, bleary-eyed, stared at the coverage of the grand procession of the coronation. A lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of excitement, a lot of history taking place. Certainly it had been about 70 years since the last coronation that took place, 1953. I was not here for that. I was not around for the last coronation, so I don't know that we'll see another. Well, we might see another one in our lifetime. We don't know. Yes, we will.
How
old is he? How old is Charles?
He's 74.
He's not young.
He was 4 years old for the first coronation, and
We
yeah.
will see another one.
So, what makes King Charles kind of interesting, and you may or may not know this, and for you British, UK history buffs, what I'm about to go over will just be elementary to you, and I apologize. So, but we'll do our best. So he's actually the 13th monarch of Britain since the union of the United Kingdom and Scotland back on May 1st in 1707. Interesting that May is still a significant time frame for all that. But in any event, so that was the 13th of that era. And before that, it goes back even further to like the King of Wessex, King Alfred the Great, ruling back in 886. This is before all of the United Kingdom was all there, so it goes back even further. That's like 900 years back almost. And then it goes back even further, all the way back to, I think, Cedric in 519 AD, right? So there's an enormous history of monarchs in that island, in that area. So there's just this wonderful history, and a lot is taking place for all of that to be part of their commonplace. And they've gone through all sorts of highs and lows. There's been good kings and bad kings and weird kings and good queens and strange queens, and certainly a lot of human history has taken place. So I was curious, what is the function, what is the role of a monarch in modern day, right? What does that all look like? And so I went to a website. It's what is it? It's the royal.uk gives us this definition of what the purpose of a monarch in modern times. It says, as head of state, the monarch undertakes constitutional and representational duties which have developed over 1,000 years of history. In addition to these state duties, the monarch has a less formal role as head of nation. But most importantly here, the sovereign acts as a focus for national identity, unity, and pride, and gives a sense of stability and continuity. Officially recognizes success and excellence and supports the ideal of volunteer service. So that's the function, and that's the purpose of a modern day hierarchy. Is they're really there to be a part of an identity, part of a element of unity and pride in something that's outside of yourself. It gives you a sense of purpose of this is what life ought to or should be like in some way. So I thought it'd be fun for us to do a fun little history lesson on the first king of Israel and what that looked like. So this morning we're going to be in 1 Samuel. So 1 Samuel is just hanging out in the Old Testament. If you have, it goes Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel. Right? So it's in the first chunk there, right after the what would be notified as the law or Torah, as you hear it referred to sometimes. So we're actually just going to read through chapter 8 because there's a lot to cover and it's difficult to take it apart in smaller aspects. So we're just going to read that and then we're going to talk about what is happening in that section. So if we're in 1 Samuel, not 2 Samuel, 2 Samuel 8 will be a much different content for you. We'll be in, here we go here. So it talks about Samuel. It says, when Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah. And they served at Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said to him, "You are old." They said other things too. They said, "And your sons do not walk in your ways now. Appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." Right? And so, but when they said this, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, "Listen to all the people that are saying to you, it is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." This is God saying to Samuel. They're rejecting God here. "As they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do." So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will do. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and to reap his harvest, and others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take a tenth of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your men servants and maid servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, and the Lord will not answer you in that day." So God agrees to a king, however. He goes on to say that, "But the people refused to listen to Samuel." No surprise here. "No," they said, "we want us a king." And I'm thinking Samuel was probably wondering to himself, did you hear a word I just said? Like, this is a bad idea, right? And so they're just like, "Yeah, we want one anyways." Okay, so then we'll be like all the other nations, and with a king to lead us, and go out before us and fight our battles. When Samuel heard all that, the people said, "He repeated it before the Lord." The Lord answered, "Listen to them and give them a king." Then Samuel said to the men of Israel, "Everyone go back to his town." So this is a discussion, an argument, a dialogue that's taking place here where the people of Israel, they're tired. They're tired of not being like everybody else. They want to have someone they can point to. So this is our king, because they're finding it difficult to say, well, this is our king, and they're pointing in all directions because it's an invisible God, right? And we think to ourselves, they wanted to have someone tangible to point to, because we as humans are finite. We require something small, something we can point to, something we understand. So we have this penchant for rulership over us without even realizing we want a ruler. We want somebody who can point and say, "Yeah, that's our guy." Have you ever had a really good boss at work? Anybody? Anyone have a really good boss? Anyone have a really bad boss at work? We're not talking about them this morning. We're talking about the good bosses, all right? So we have those good bosses, right? And we think to ourselves, man, I could work for this person for the next 25 years. You go back to work on Monday, and they say they're done in 3 weeks. So this happens, right? We lose these amazing people in our life, and then we feel ourselves with this sense of missing. There's a hole that's now empty in us. We're like, well, I really like working for that guy, or I like working for that girl, because they were so nice and so smart, and they were just they understood me, right? And so we have this built-in framework with how we function. We desire to have someone that we aspire to be like, someone that we admire, and also someone that understands us. We have this built-in function within us. We want someone to rule us, but we want them to, still give us some bandwidth to do our thing. And so this is not new for us. This is not new for humans. And so we have this pattern that we see here all throughout Scripture, where we have this element of sin, right? You know that Abijah and Joel, they were doing their own thing. They were taking bribes. They were doing just not so great things, all in the sake of being a priest for God, right? And so then the elders, they beg, right? So there's this pleading. So there's this sin period, then there's this pleading period. Hey, let's get a king here. Let's try to make things right here. And then God, like he always does, reminds them and says, I've already bought you out of bondage before. I was your king. I am your king. Don't be so soon to forget, right? This is not new information. And so the people, being belligerent and stubborn, saying, but we want to see somebody. We want to look at someone. And so God warns them, and God often provides a warning of concern to say, if you do this, then this. If this, then that. Right? We see this all throughout Scripture. Like if you allow this, this will happen. If you walk away from the ways of the Lord, I will hand you over to your enemies, right? We see that all throughout the Old Testament. And then, so God provides a warning, but then ultimately, what does God show? God has compassion, and He shows mercy here, and provides them what they wanted, not what they needed, right? And no, I'm not going to sing the song. But they had this element of getting what they thought they desired, and God being loving and compassionate and knowing how limited their thinking was, gave it to them. Say, okay, you can have it. And then you read the next, I don't know, couple hundred pages here of Old Testament that talks through just the suffering of the kings that led them. Horrible choices after horrible choices. They forgot their first love, which was God, right? They forgot the covenant of Abraham, covenant given to Moses, and they went about their lives, did their own thing. But in their mind, they were so happy because they had a king. And you remember the transition from David to Solomon. It was okay. It was okay. It was a pretty decent transition of power from Solomon to his son. It got real twisted, and that is really what started the framework of the split of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, right? So not even 3 generations removed, they already started to fully fall into ruin because the warnings of the kings after Solomon had said that they're going to treat them super harshly. They're going to whip them with scorpions. If you remember, we went through that, which I don't want to be whipped, but especially with scorpions, it just sounds especially not nice. And that's exactly what says is going to happen here. He's going to make you your slaves, and that day comes, you'll cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, and the Lord will not answer you in that day. So this was not like a, hey, this might happen. Oftentimes we read stuff in Scripture and we're like, yeah, that's some pretty good advice. I'm glad that doesn't apply to me, right? We're all wrong. It all applies to all of us. And so it's important that if we are so bent on this one thing, if I just get this one thing, everything will be better, right? If I can just have this job, if I can finally achieve this salary amount, or I can live in this neighborhood, or I can become friends with that person, or I can restore this friendship, everything will be better, right? Or if you look at it athletically, if I just win the Super Bowl, everything will be great, right? That's the whole thing for these athletes, is they're told their whole life from the minute they're in young football, play this is what we do, we go for the Super Bowl, and then categorically you talk to people who have won the Super Bowl weeks and months afterwards, and there is this overwhelming, soul-crushing despair that hits them, even amongst those who are Christians, that they feel this enormous sense of departure of what was it all even for, right? Because that's not meant to fulfill us. These are these temporary wins. These are these temporary things we aspire to. And so God is reminding them of this. And so we see this happen again, earlier we see Moses, right? We have a sin scenario. So here's the pattern. We have sin. Moses killed an Egyptian who was treating someone unfairly, so he fled. So then God says, hey, I know you've been gone for about 40 years, give or take, you need to go back and free my people. Moses says, not me, I'm not your God. So there's a pleading that takes place, and God reminds him of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and says, well, we have a covenant to fulfill here, and you're my guy. And so then he's concerned, and he's like, I don't know what's going to happen here. So then we have a reminding, and then God warns, right? God warns Pharaoh and says, through Moses, and says, if you don't do this, horrible things are coming, right? And we see the consequences of the 10 plagues roll out here because they weren't following or doing what God asked them to do. So finally what ends up happening is God shows mercy, and he gives Pharaoh not 1, not 2, not 3, I'll skip it to 9, not 9 times. He gives him 9 full times to say, here's your last chance. If you don't let my people go on this 9th time, it's going to get real bad for you real quick, and it's going to be devastating. And the Pharaoh says, no, my way's better. You don't control me. And then the Passover, the 10th plague, right? We have this plague where all of the firstborn of every household in Egypt was taken by the angel of death, right? So we have this horrible event that takes place. And only then, when the absolute worst thing that could happen happened to them, that they finally wake up and said, okay, you got to go. Get out of here. We don't want you here. And so, but even so, there's mercy in the midst of that, right? There wasn't the first time. It was 9 separate opportunities where God provided them some pretty harsh warnings, and yet they still did their own thing, right? And so then we see this again with Jesus, right? Jesus comes and he came to deal with sin, right? He himself was not sin, but he came to deal with sin perfectly and fully. And he says, in his prayer, and he's in Gethsemane, he says, take this cup from me, Lord, but but your will, not mine, right? He's pleading with God. It's like, is there a way that I can have someone else do this? Jesus, knowing he was the only one that could actually do this. The only one who had the power, ability, and the sinless life to accomplish that big mission. So then God reminds him of his purposes, and then Jesus goes and reminds the disciples and says, I asked you to pray with me, right? And what did you guys do? You took a nap. Jesus knew he had hours left with them. Not days, not weeks, not years. He knew he had hours left with them. And what did they do? They slept, right? A lot of times we think to ourselves, like, man, those disciples were so silly, right? They're hanging out with Jesus, they're taking a nap. What could be wrong with them, right? Well, of course they're tired. They were traveling a lot. They were often in not reasonable housing. They were wherever they could lay their head. There wasn't a normal accommodations for them. They were typically being hunted for. We knew that the Jewish community leaders at the time were not happy with Jesus. He was disrupting everything that they had laid the groundwork for the last 400 years. And so they had a lot of frustration. And so they were scared. They were exhausted. And so they slept because they were just overwhelmed. They couldn't deal with it anymore. And yet Jesus was telling them, just hold on a little longer. You only have me for a little while longer. And I wonder if we have the same measure of urgency over our lives, right? We might think to ourselves, oh, I know they don't believe in Jesus, but you know what? There's always tomorrow. There's always next week. There's always next year. Maybe next Easter I'll invite them to church and we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll become a Christian, a year from now, right? Jesus is reminding them and us, it's like we have this time, and this mercy that we're operating in right now is that we're not experiencing the full judgment of God right now. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, the prince of the air, the enemy of our souls, is wandering about trying to crush and destroy and thwart the purposes of the church, but we know that God is working through that and underneath that, and is able to use his church, his people, to overcome that desire of his. But we have mercy. Each day we have, and we're not facing that judgment, is a mercy between what we ought to get and what we're not getting. And so it's important that we look at this, right? We have this sin, this pleading, God's reminding, God's warning them, and then God has mercy, but a time will come when the opportunity to make that choice is going to be that 10th plague. The hour will be over. Our time will be up. We'll have any more time to witness, any more time to reach out, make a phone call. That time will come to an end. So now is the time we need to operate. So this morning, we're going to participate in the Lord's Supper. So if we could have, we have Randy, and we could have Holbert and Steve. Come on up. So as they pass that out, I love that. As you read in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 11, 23 through 26, you don't have to turn there, but if you're ever wondering, like, where do we talk about it? It talks about it in Matthew and also again in Corinthians. This is the account. So what's beautiful about this passage in Corinthians, Paul, if you recall, was not at the Lord's Supper. He wasn't hanging out there. And yet he has a crystal clear recall of precisely what took place that evening, which is further evidence of his apostleship. Right? People are wondering if he was truly an apostle of God, if he truly had this anointing over his life, if you truly had this picture. The evidence is right here in Corinthians, because he gives a play-by-play, perfect event of what took place that night. So when we read here that Jesus had told him this is what took place that night, he says, "For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it, and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" So let's do it together. So as we think about that, certainly it's a picture of the Last Supper is, again, it's a timeline. We know that Jesus knows he has hours left with them, not weeks, not days, not years, not months. He's got a short window left with him, and so he's telling them, say, guys, this is important, not because you're better when you do it, but it's because it's going to remind you permanently of two things that takes place in the next 24 hours, right? The Passion of the Christ, what takes place during that one-day window, right? I'm going to be broken. My body will be broken. I'll be hit. I'll be harmed. That's the bread. If you rip the bread, think of my flesh. Think of my body being torn, right? And when we think about the blood of Christ, we think about this is his blood that is spilled, not because he did anything wrong, but he gave it freely so that he could atone for, he could cover us from our sins perfectly. So in the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me." It's important that he says a covenant in my blood, because we have this picture of sacrifice in the Old Testament. We have the picture of goats and pigeons and doves and rams and all these things. All these sacrifices are taken. And that was animals' blood. So the new covenant is, it said, this is my blood which has been given for you. So whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Let's take this together. So I love that we have this reminder, this time to just pause and reflect and think about. We have this moment to pause and just be grateful for what Jesus did, right? He is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. He's actually the one we're actually after. He's the one that we're actually looking to be ruled by and loved by, because who knows us better than God? Nobody. Right? Even your deepest, darkest, never told anybody thoughts, God knows them intimately. There's nothing that is hidden from him. He knows every facet of you, and yet he still chooses to love you in the midst of all those thoughts, which I am grateful. I'm so grateful. And so as we move on here, I wanted to just remind us of a couple different things here. Looking back, and you don't have to turn to these pages here, but looking back to Daniel, we see this picture here where we're reminded, this is during the revelation of this dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, and it says that, it's just a reminder as to earthly kings and kingdoms falter and fail. It says, "In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it itself will endure forever." And that's the picture of the rock crushing through all of the kingdoms. Well, that rock is Jesus, crushing all of the kingdoms that had ever been, ever would be, both in history before, present now, and future to come. He will be the new kingdom and the new king over all. And that's what our hope ought to be, and it should be. And we look to kings because we love this picture, we love this, but that's really just an echo. It's a shadow of a true kingdom and a true beautiful royalty that we get to participate in by proclaiming our faith in Jesus. And so we see it again in the prophets in Revelation. He goes on to say, in Revelation, the seventh angel sounded his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven which said, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever." So that's a picture for all of us to be reminded that this is our hope, right? So we know that humans will always fail to measure up perfectly. That's just how we're functioning right now. We will not be perfect, but yet we crave this perfection. We crave this king. The reason we want a monarch, the reason we want a king or a ruler, is because we want someone that can truly be without defect, that we can just look back to ourselves and, well, I may not have it all together, but at least our leader is making good choices. At least our ruler is living according to what's truly right and truly wrong, right? And there's true righteousness. So we want that. We desire this deep within us. But we have to be reminded that Jesus will never fail us. He was and is the enduring, perfect example of what a human life full of humility, grace, and truth looks like. Jesus lived out a life what a human's experience should have been. Perfect, without defect, living in perfect cooperation with God the Father. But sin has marred that, and we're now separated because of that. So I want to do just one last thing here for us to look at. It's just a quick prophecy and fulfillment of these elements here, right? So we have this prophecy statement in Psalms here. It says, "Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but my ears you have opened. Burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. Then I said, here I am, I have come. It is written about me in the scroll. I desire to do your will, my God, and your law is within my heart." So oftentimes people might question the perfectness or the without blemish aspect of Jesus. And there's this picture here of this perfect sacrifice, this complete sacrifice that ultimately is greater than the law, right? It's the fulfillment of it. And so we see here in Hebrews, or it goes on to say, "Therefore when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. With burnt offerings and sin offerings you were not pleased. Then I said, here I am, it is written about me in the scroll. I have come to do your will, my God." First he said, sacrifices and offerings, burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not desire, nor were you pleased with them. though they were offered in accordance with the law. Then he said, "Here I am, I have come to do your will." He sets aside the first to establish the second. And by that will we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. So that's our picture here. We have this picture of this perfect king who does the thing that we were not able to do, not only lead perfectly, but to serve us in a way that we never even could have imagined and then deserved. And so our final thought here is in John 18:36. It says, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." Let's be reminded of that our kingdom, that citizenship that we desire and that we want to be part of, is not of this world. It's otherworldly. It's God's kingdom. And so we need to be reminded of that when this kingdom that we operate in now fails us. When government officials don't make choices that we agree with. When laws are passed that we know are morally reprehensible. When decisions are made that are outside of our control, but yet we must be respectful to and do unto Caesar what is to Caesar, right? We know we have to follow the rules of the land so that we can be an example to those around us, that we can do it with love and with grace. But just because something's a rule doesn't mean just because something's legal doesn't mean you have to agree with it. And that's an important distinction here. Law does not drive morality. Our holy Savior drives that, and that's hopefully what we'll be reminded of when we think about this. So let's close with prayer this morning. Father, thank you so much for your word this morning and the time we get to spend focusing on it and learning about it and talking about it. I pray that you would put deep in our hearts a clear reminder that the kingdom of this world will fade, that the rules of this world will pass away, that we know that your kingdom will last forever and ever and ever. And while that's difficult to imagine, difficult to conjure with our finite minds, I pray that you would give us a picture, a vision, a hope, and a courage to wrap our minds around that to the best of our ability through your power, that we might have hope in something that is far greater than anything in this world could possibly offer. Hope in a kingdom that is perfect, where there is no conflict, there is no challenges, and all relationships are reconciled. Finances are not a burden. Injuries don't happen. There's no crying. There's no shame. There's no guilt. There's no remorse. There's a land. There's a new heaven and new earth that you desire to bring forth to us. And we're just so excited about that. Help us to be mindful of that, and help us to operate as Christians with that urgency. We might share that news with others, and that they would be receptive, and that we wouldn't be discouraged when we're rebuffed or people don't want to talk about it. Just still give us the courage to start that conversation and to be that light to the world around us. And we just pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.